Hey, it's all yours.
Excellent. I should be unmuted now. Thank you very much.
Yes.
I am going to share my screen. And bear with me, I am testing a couple of different things and doing a couple of demos, so I may slow down once in a while to make sure that I don't mess up something. So here we go. Thank you again for the introduction, Gary. I am an ANV volunteer. I have been for a couple of years, so I'm somewhat familiar with these sessions as well. Good morning to all of you. Thank you for joining this coffee and conversation. As Gary noted, my name is Barbara Fillip. I am semi-retired, meaning that I continue to do some consulting part-time, and I have some time to do other things, which is also great. And in the state of semi-retirement, I try to do things that leverage my existing knowledge and experience and apply them in new areas. So in my full-time job that I quit last April, I did a lot to help people use technology in the workplace. I am not an IT person per se. I am more of an educator and someone who helps people learn how to use different technologies and other things. So I've also spent the last 6 months helping employees in my previous employer's organization, specifically on adopting generative artificial intelligence in the workplace. So I may say generative artificial intelligence, and the short version is Gen AI. So Gen for generative and AI for artificial intelligence. Now, I want to continue exploring generative AI as I'm outside of the general workforce. And I want to continue to share what I know. I also worked as an adjunct professor at George Mason University, where I was teaching knowledge management. So I like to keep learning and keep teaching what I know. Today, what I've done is I've adapted what I know about generative AI to create a presentation that hopefully will be informative. And it also includes 2 or 3 demos using different tools, so we can get a grip really on what it is and how it works and how you might start using it. All right, so what are our objectives today? I will try to help you understand what generative AI is, and also to some extent how it works. We will explore its benefits, potential uses, and we'll talk about practical uses for you. And of course, we will also discuss concerns, safety practices, and you may have a lot of questions, so feel free to put them in a chat, and Gary will help me figure out when and how to answer them. I really hope that by the end of the session, you will have a good sense of how you might want to explore this topic further by practicing it, by engaging with generative AI tools, so that you can learn more about the topic as well. So let's dive in. I'm going to start with a little icebreaker, and I'm going to show you a few pictures, and I'm going to be quiet as I show you these few pictures, and I'm going to ask you to think about your own relationship to technology. And I'm not talking about generative AI specifically, just your perspective on technology, whether it's helping you, whether it's frustrating. Just start thinking about those things as I show you a few of these pictures. You don't have to recognize yourself in these pictures or in any way. They might just resonate, or they might help you think through. So I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to give you maybe 15 seconds for each of these pictures, and then I'll get back on the screen. Right, so I know that that was quick. That was just a little warm-up to make you think about technology in general. Now let's think about specifically AI, which has really come up as a topic of conversation maybe in the past 3 years, I guess, since the launch of ChatGPT. It's probably come up a lot in your regular life in different ways. That doesn't mean AI is not actually new, but there's so many advancements nowadays that, especially around generative AI, that it's something that you're likely to encounter. And you're probably encountering AI in general in your daily life without even knowing that there's AI behind what you're playing with. So let me know in the chat, or just think, if you don't want to type in the chat, what comes to mind when you hear the terms AI or artificial intelligence? Beyond, technology that we talked about earlier, what does AI bring up for you?
So we've got robots, or the amazing sci-fi movie of that name. And we've got a question about whether this can be embedded in websites. Efficiency is another response.
Mm-hmm. Right, so it's not a new technology, but there are new applications of AI that are becoming very important in all kinds of fields. And yes, it can be embedded in websites. It can be in different ways. When you shop online, you're likely to be actually engaging with an AI or some kind of algorithm that allows you to search more efficiently or something like that. So it's all over the place. We don't always know that it's what we are interacting with. But with generative AI, you're going to know that you're interacting with generative AI because you're prompting it yourself. So let me keep going. So I'm going to do 3 demos. This is going to be the first one. Depending on which tool you're using, if you're trying to use generative AI, depending on which tool you're using, and depending on the browser that you're using, you may experience slightly different things. Also, there's free versions of the tools, and then there's paid versions, which have significant differences in terms of the capabilities and what you will see on the screen. I have tried to only use free accounts, so I set up the demos to be only with free accounts. The first one that I'm going to do is Microsoft Copilot. It's one of the tools. The other ones that I'm going to show you are Gemini, ChatGPT, and Claude. If we have time, there are other things, but those are quite enough to start with. So in order not to lose you, I am now going to share a different screen. All right, you should be seeing a screen that says, "Hey, how can I help?"
Yes.
This is the window when you go to Copilot. And by the way, the slides have all the links that will take you to these places. So we will share the slides, and the presentation will be recorded, so you'll have access to that. You can see it's just saying, "How can I help you?" I did not sign in, so I did not put any of my information. This is not the Microsoft account or anything. And so it's going to be a limited account because it's free. And what I'm going to demonstrate here is how to use the voice version of this. So you can type a question here or a prompt. I'm actually going to use the voice, and hopefully you'll be able to hear it as well. So I'm going to talk to Copilot.
Hey there, I'm Copilot. You can chat with me just like you would with a friend. Feel free to ask me questions, talk through your ideas, or even switch it up with another language. What can I call you?
You don't need my name, but I'm presenting to a group of volunteers and members of an organization called Arlington Neighborhood Village. What do you know about them?
Arlington Neighborhood Village is a community-based, non-profit organization. They provide a network of support to help older adults in Arlington, Virginia, remain in their homes as they age. The organization offers services like transportation, home maintenance, and social and educational activities, all aimed at fostering a supportive community. How can I help with your presentation?
I will be talking to them about generative AI. How should I approach this topic?
Considering the audience, I'd keep it straightforward and relatable. Start with the basics of generative AI. Briefly explain how it works, like using algorithms.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop it. Essentially, I asked it, should I present today? So I stopped the listening because there's a limit of 3 minutes and I was getting out of end of it. And if you stop the listening, you're still getting the answers in type. So it's actually showing me what I asked for. My prompt is here, and then the answer is there. So that's one of the tools. And obviously you can prompt with all kinds of other things. Now, I see it's very light on details. Some of the answers are going to be very short. It's not going to give you pages and pages unless you ask for pages and pages of information. And what I always recommend is don't limit yourself to the first answer that you get. You're going to want to follow up and have a real conversation with the AI so that you can get details and ask follow-up questions of that kind. All right, so I'm going to try to go back to the slides.
Barbara, while you're doing that, can you explain what the word generative in generative AI means?
Yes, I think that will come up almost immediately in the slides.
Okay.
Let me get back to the slides. Here I go. All right, so I was here. So here's the definition. Here's a little bit more about the definition. If I say that generative AI is AI that creates content, then you're going to be asking me, well, what's artificial intelligence? What's AI? So artificial intelligence is like teaching computers to learn like humans, and humans learn by looking at data, making decisions, and all of that. But AI lacks common sense and emotion, so it's artificial intelligence. It's not human intelligence. And AI is kind of the science of making intelligent machines that can perform tasks that would normally require human intelligence. And it's now embedded in many applications, like I mentioned before. If you do any online shopping, it's likely that AI was involved in the process to enhance your experience, perhaps helping you to find what you were looking for. It helped through your search. It's also in fraud prevention, in autonomous vehicles, facial recognition. Somebody mentioned robots before. Yes, robotic applications rely extensively on AI as well. So today, I'll focus on generative AI. So what do we mean by it's generative? What kind of content does it generate? It can create text, and that's the most common use, but it can also create images, and I'll show you a couple. It can even create music, and it can create videos. So it can create all kinds of things for you based on a prompt. So the prompt is essentially your instruction to the generative AI tool. And it can be a question, it doesn't even have to be a question. It can be, I'm brainstorming something, help me brainstorm, and the tool will help you by asking you questions that you can then answer. So it's not just a question answering machine, it's much more than that. The key here is that it's not like search where you go to Google and you put a search term or something like that. It's a way to use natural language, plain English, but actually you can do it in French, other languages, whatever, it will understand. And so you can use natural language, the way we naturally speak, and you don't need to know any software code to interact with the software, interact with the algorithms and all of that are behind it. So we call that natural language. And this is also why you can talk to the AI and it will understand what you are saying. Now, when I say understand, we have to be careful how we use those terms. It does not actually understand in a way a human understands language. And I'll get into that in a minute. And I'll also talk a little bit later about the kinds of prompts that work better, like how to write your prompt in a way that makes it more effective. Here's an example of an image that was created by DALL-E, which is one of the tools that specializes in creating images. What I asked for was an image that would represent something related to, I can't remember what the exact prompt was, but something related to eco-travel, nature, the outdoors, and that's what it came up with. This one was using DALL-E, which is associated with ChatGPT. So if you use ChatGPT, you should be able to ask for an image. It's actually going to use DALL-E to create that image. And here's a second example. So I write speculative fiction in my free time. And when I prompted ChatGPT and I asked for an image based on the conversation that I was having with it about the novel that I'm writing, it came up with this. Obviously, I'm not typing my novel on an old-fashioned typewriter, but still, it's kind of, I keep that image as sort of an inspiration for my writing activities. Now, I am not going to demo an image creation, and there is a reason for that. These image generators and most generative AI tools have a very environmentally damaging cost. And so I don't use it for frivolous reasons, and I don't use it when I don't have to. And I will talk a little bit more about the concerns and risks associated with generative AI and some AI in general towards the end of the presentation. So I show you these images. I've done it 2 or 3, and I don't go back and do more. I don't overuse it, because I'm also an environmental activist, so I try to be careful. All right, so how does it work? So far I've showed you, you can talk to it, you can create images with it, you can get answers to text prompts. As a user of the generative AI tool, you might think that all you need to know is how to access the tool and where to enter your prompt. And I don't want to go too deep into technical details, but I think it's important to understand a little bit about how it works, because it will open your eyes to why it sometimes makes mistakes, and it can easily tell you, give you inaccurate sources, and it can do all kinds of things that you have to be very careful with. So let's try to do a little bit of a deep dive into how it works. It learns from patterns and from examples. So generative AI is like a very, very fast learner that can read and listen to huge amounts of information. So it's had access to books, articles, conversations, pictures, more, everything. And that's often referred to as its training data or training data set. Once the AI has ingested all this knowledge or information, the result is a large language model, or LLM. You may have heard that term as well. It's often in the news. There are multiple large language models, but the LLM, or large language model, is sort of the brain behind tools like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and all of that. It's called large because it's been trained on a massive amount of text from books, websites, and all kinds of things. And nowadays, it's even being trained based on audio and video and not just text. So again, it doesn't actually understand what it's reading, but instead it's looking for patterns. For example, if it reads many recipes, it will learn over time that flour, sugar, and eggs often go together in baking. And then I'm gonna go to the second point, it starts predicting what the answer should be to whatever question you asked. So it's predicting what comes next. When you give it a question or a prompt, it uses the patterns that it has learned to guess what the best response might be. You enter your prompt in what is referred to as natural language that I mentioned before, which is the way people naturally speak or write in everyday words, sentences, conversations. You don't need to enter the code. Just need to speak your question. And the answer will come as well in natural language so that you can understand it as well. It's not spitting out some code that you would then have to get an engineer to explain to you. It's speaking to you in plain English. I say English, but it's doing very well in other languages as well. Most of the common languages, it does very well with them as well. The challenge is that most of the training data has been in English because the language of the internet is primarily English. So it's been trained on primarily English language content, which also introduces all kinds of biases, but that's a broader issue. So let's get back. It learns patterns from examples, then it predicts what comes next in the answer, and then it generates creative content. What do I mean by creative content? It's not copy pasting an answer from somewhere on the internet. It's absorbing everything that's on the internet and whatever it has access to from that training data. And then it's learned these patterns. And now it's going to create an answer that doesn't exist anywhere else. It's not picking up a paragraph here and there from the internet. It's creating new content. That's why it's called generative artificial intelligence. So if you ask it to write a poem, it combines words and rhythms that it has seen in other poems to create something new. It's not picking up a poem and putting it as an answer. If you ask for an image, it combines various shapes, colors, and styles that it has analyzed from everything it's seen, and then it generates an answer, a brand new answer. So there are all kinds of issues in terms of copyrights and things like that. We can touch on some of those later. All right, so what does that mean for you? Like, how can you use it? What can it be useful for you? Writing. So let's say that you've been wanting to write an email to your neighborhood association's president about getting some help shoveling the snow on the sidewalks. Of course, you can write it yourself and it doesn't have to be perfect, but what if you write a draft, then you feed it to the generative AI and it gives you, and you ask it for feedback. How can I improve this draft email? And the generative AI will give you some kind of recommendations. You don't have to take the recommendations, but it can help you improve your draft. Or you can directly ask the AI by saying, draft an email for my neighborhood association and feed it to me, or not send it, because it's not going to send it for you. You're still going to have to review it and push the send button in your email. So there's all kinds of ways you can use generative AI to improve your writing, to learn how to write better, things like that, to draft things for you, I would say. The second key thing is for learning. Let's say you just want to be, I do that all the time. You want to be informed about the latest IRS rules and new policies related to Social Security. Now, be careful. It's not always going to have the latest information, and anything that it tells you, you have to validate it, verify, actually go to the IRS, essentially. But to get an overview of how the Social Security has been treated in the past in terms of taxation and things like that, you can ask a tool like ChatGPT or some of the others and get some relevant information. So that's for learning, and you can use it for learning whatever it is you're interested in. And I see some of the questions coming up, so I will address them as well. Okay, another thing that I've used ChatGPT in particular for is troubleshooting, and I'll show you an example later. I use that a lot. So a while ago, I had some issue with my bicycle. The brakes were making like some annoying squeaky noises, and I'm not a bicycle. I mean, I ride a lot, but I don't necessarily know how to fix my bike very well. So I could have figured it out in many ways. I could have just taken it to the bike store and told them it's squeaking, fix it. But I like to learn how to fix things. So generally, I would just go to YouTube and watch a lot of videos on squeaky bicycle brakes and try to figure it out. That can be extremely time consuming. So what I did, I ended up going to ChatGPT, explained what my problem was, got a very simple list of things that could go wrong. And then I asked for videos, like, okay, for each of these things that could go wrong, please give me a link to a YouTube video that would actually address that problem. That simplified my search task on YouTube, but I still had to go watch them. It doesn't know what my problem is. It can only help me troubleshoot. Right, so all kinds of things that you can do. Managing health, I put a question mark because I think we need to be very careful when using the internet in general, but generative AI even more, when we start asking health-related questions, because it should tell you to go, ask your physician or your doctor, but sometimes it will give you advice, and you want to be very, very careful not to trust it just blindly. So a couple of additional points here before moving on a little bit. Some search engines now, you may have noticed, are integrating generative AI. So if you type in a question, you might not just get a list of results like old-fashioned search engines. You might actually get something created by a generative AI, like an answer, a narrative answer to your question. So what some of that means is that it might become advantageous now when you're doing a search using Google to actually put a full native language question, not just key terms. Just put your whole question in there, and you might actually get a generative AI answer. And finally, before I move on to the next slide, even if you do not personally use generative AI, you should be aware now that people around you may be using it. An email that you receive may have been created by generative AI. It doesn't mean it's evil or anything, but it may have been generated by AI. It may have been edited by AI. Your doctor may be using generative AI in some ways, or other forms of AI. And a lot of people you interact with may be using it. So it's kind of nice, even if you're not going to use it yourself, to understand how it works, some of the things that it does well and some things that it does not do well, or some things you need to worry about. And you always want to question whether what it's telling you is accurate or not. And by the way, the word for when generative AI gives you inaccurate information, false or just not accurate, is a hallucination. It's hallucinating. It's making up stuff sometimes. Okay, let's move on. So I think there was a question was about how do you talk to it, like whether you're typing or talking to it with your voice. How do you ask the question? Well, the term is prompting. You're going to prompt the generative AI. Prompting is the same as asking a question or putting a term in a search engine. It's the way you communicate with the generative AI tool by typing or talking in plain language. And it can understand, and again, understand in quotation marks, what you're saying because of that natural language processing, or NLP, which the tool can do. So if you
Barbara, to expand on that, you talked about getting help with writing an email to your community association. Do you have to type the entire draft in, or can you say, can you help me with this, and then include a link to it?
No. Well, depending on which version you're using, there will be a limit to, there will be different ways of doing it. Depending on the way which tool you're actually using, and if you're having a paid account versus a free account, the functionalities are going to be different. First of all, you don't necessarily need to draft your whole thing. You can say, I want an email that will, and you can just in 2 or 3 sentences say what you want the email to say, and then the tool will draft the entire email for you. Another option would be to draft your email, copy and paste the text in the AI tool prompt box, and then it will adjust it for you or give you feedback. Another approach, sometimes depending on the tool again, is to upload a document. So you may have drafted your email in Word. You would have to upload the document and then tell it to review, and then it's not really good at following links. It actually cannot, in most cases, I may be wrong, but it's not going to go find things that with links. It's not going to be good at that, especially if it's on your own computer, and you don't want it. You do not want ChatGPT to go into your computer, read your documents. So you may have to, and that brings me to another issue, which we'll touch on in a minute, which is privacy and your sensitive information. You do not want to put any of that in the prompt that you're going to write. So you're going to have to be careful. Even about drafting an email, make it relatively generic, like don't give names, don't put names in the email or anything like that. You can just edit it later and add the actual information that needs to be in the email. Let me get back to, I kind of got sidetracked a little bit. So there's a little bit of a conversational element to prompting. I think I mentioned that earlier, but you do not want to just ask a question, get an answer, and be done. You ask a question, you get an answer. Typically, the answer would actually end with a follow-up question from the AI. It will ask you, do you want to go deeper into this topic? Is this what you wanted? It's going to try to engage with you. And you should, if you're not satisfied with the initial answer, you should, excuse me, you should follow up and ask additional questions to get to a better answer. The other way is to actually make your initial prompt more specific. So you need to give the tool enough information in your prompt, enough context, so that it gives you something that's good enough. So we're going to go, I think the next thing is a demo. Yeah. We're going to go try something with Gemini. So with Gemini, again, this Gemini is by Google. So if you have a Google account, you should have no problem using this. No payment whatsoever, but I think you have to sign into your Google account. I'm not quite sure. So in this case, I put a very, very simple prompt. I want to walk more in 25. It's not even a question, like it's a very bad prompt, right? And so it's encouraging, it's going to help me, it's going to encourage me to walk. This is just the beginning of the answer. It's actually much more. So what I did then, I'm going to actually stop sharing this and go to the actual Gemini. It keeps taking me, okay, I'm going to go to Gemini. All right, Gemini looks quite similar, right? It's the same kind of big window. I ask my question here. In this case, it remembers the chat that I had before. So I'm not going to create a new chat. I'm just going to take you to my previous chat that I tried yesterday. And so instead of that very simple prompt that said, I want to walk more, I said, I want to walk more in 2025. I'm called sedentary, da-da-da-da. I give it a little bit of context, and I even said where I live, not in details, but hey, I'm in Arlington County, because I want a more sophisticated answer that will relate to where I live, so that it can tell me in its answer, okay, there are walking programs in Arlington. There are different parks that you might want to visit. So it's going to give me something much more sophisticated. And then I asked a follow-up question. Does Arlington offer resources for walking? And it gave me pretty good answers. And there's local walking groups, all kinds of useful information. Now, I could have done a Google search and eventually got to these kinds of answers, but that's Gemini. And so here's the example of fixing my bicycle brakes. What could be, I started with a very simple question. What could be causing squeaky brakes on a bicycle? So it gave me all kinds of possible things, but then I said, okay, could you recommend some useful videos? And it did. Eventually I fixed my bike and I did not have to take it to the store. Another example would be, I wanted to try to figure out how to take public transportation from Arlington to Annapolis. This example was actually not very satisfactory. Like, it gave me some information, but ultimately half of that information was inaccurate, and I had to, use other means to validate the trip, the ways to get there, the beach option and stuff like that. So again, it's not always accurate. It hallucinates. It wants to help you, so it will give you an answer unless you specifically say. You can add a sentence in your prompt that says, if you do not know, don't answer, like as opposed to the general attitude of these tools is that it will come up with an answer even if it's not really, it doesn't know, it's just making up stuff. All right, I'm going to come back to the presentation. Well, so far I have not messed up the demos too badly, so we're good. All right. So for prompt improvements, so one of the things I do once in a while when I'm not satisfied that my prompt is getting me the right answer is I actually ask the generative AI tool to improve my prompt. So if I tell it I want to walk more in 2025, and then I ask what would be a better prompt, this is what it came up with. And it gave me the idea of, okay, these are all the things I should put in my prompt to make it more specific. And then this did not include Arlington, Virginia. So I edited this and added, okay, I'm in Arlington, Virginia. What's more relevant here? That's part of the context. You want to put as much context as possible without putting in your personal address or things like that. So here's the edited prompt. I just added Arlington County to make it a little bit more context specific. All right, so I am interested in going beyond using generative AI for basic questions that could be answered by Google or, in other ways. So what I'm trying to explore really is potential uses of generative AI that go beyond that. We need to think about going beyond simple question and answer tools. And what I want to explore are some of these things: personalized storytelling and reminiscence, creative expression, artistic pursuit, and those types of things. Some of it is more aspirational. I don't think it's been fully explored and developed yet, or fully integrated into existing programs for older adults. If you found something that's really creative, please let me know. I'm really interested in doing more work in that area. So just to inspire you a little bit, I've put some things together. Some personalized storytelling and reminiscence work. You can do all kinds of things with generative AI, way beyond using it to draft your email to the local association. There's so much more creative opportunities there. I think it would be great to try things out. Creative expression, artistic pursuit. I don't use the music tools, but I'm sure there's a lot that could be done there to explore. Oh, actually, I did use it for one of my classes. I created it's generative AI song based on my knowledge management work that I do with my students. It was interesting. It was just for demo for them, also teaching them. Cognitive stimulation and learning. I think there's a lot that could be done here for older adults working with generative, either to create content for older adults or to make sure older adults are engaging in some of these tools in useful ways, in very productive ways. So some of these things, and for social connection and communication. Now, in no way do I want to suggest that AI or generative AI should replace personal connections and face-to-face meetings when possible. But I do think there's potential for AI and generative AI to support social connection and communications in some ways, as a complement to other things, like personal connections, real connections. Also, therapeutic applications are being explored, I think, for art therapy and creating all kinds of different, more creative things with it. So well beyond what we think about in terms of asking a question and getting an answer. All right, so some of the risks and challenges, and I'm looking at the time, I want to make sure that I can answer some of the questions. Key risks, I'm not going to talk much about the societal risks, although they exist. I'm going to focus on individual risks related to our individual use of some of these tools. So focusing on privacy, misinformation, and overdependence. There's a lot of lack of transparency in how generative AI and other AI tools in general handle your data, which is why I hope I have said several times already that you should not enter any personal information in a generative AI prompt. You do not. The generative AI does not need to know your name, does not need to know your social security number, doesn't need to know much of anything about you. If you want to give it context, give it general context, not the specific details about your unique situation. So that's one, because we do not know exactly how the data is being handled by these tools. Misinformation and disinformation. I did mention hallucinations. There is a risk of trusting AI-generated content when in fact it is inaccurate, outdated, potentially biased. Remember what I said a few slides ago about how generative AI works. It does not truly understand your question. It is guessing. It's guessing the answer based on massive amounts of information. So technically, everything that generative AI produces is hallucinations. It's guessing. It's just that, you know, more often than not, it's correct. But then there's maybe, you don't know how much of the percentage of what it's spitting out at you is actually correct. So you have to be very careful about trusting what it's telling you. Not only is it just guessing, but it could have learned from very flawed information that was part of its training data. And it could be answering questions based on what in my knowledge management background, we call zombie knowledge. Zombie knowledge is outdated and unverified knowledge that exists on the internet everywhere, and that these tools have been trained on to some extent. Also, generative AI tools cannot fact check themselves. I mean, you can ask them to verify the information, and sometimes they'll come back and they say, oh, sorry, that was inaccurate. But you just can't trust 100% what they're saying. You should always ask for sources, but even when you ask for sources, you cannot trust that what it gave you is accurate. You have to actually follow the link that it's giving you and check that that link is actually accurate. Many YouTube videos that it gives me as resource, I click the link, it actually is a dead end, and that video either does not exist or never existed. So we have to be careful. Overdependence. I think people can become, and I'm struggling with that a little bit, overdependence on AI can lead to a loss of critical thinking skills or even creativity when you're relying too heavily on AI for problem solving or content creation. It can also reduce your self-reliance in terms of decision-making or learning processes. So we have to be careful not to go to an AI tool for everything and anything, and make sure that we continue to apply critical thinking skills to our challenges in daily life. And it could lead to additional challenges for older adults who really need to challenge their own cognitive functionalities on a daily basis and not over-rely on tools necessarily. So I'm not going to touch on the societal risks, although I think they're very important. The one I did mention earlier is some of the environmental concerns. These tools are very heavy consumers of energy, both in the training of the tools and in deploying the models. So they contribute a lot to carbon emissions. Every conversation I have with an AI requires processing through large data centers. You may have heard about the data centers that are being built in the region and across the country. And those use massive amounts of water and energy. So it can also create a lot of, and that's not the only concern that we have to think about at the societal level, but that's one that I'm particularly aware of and careful with.
Barbara, just so you know, we're at 10 minutes to 11.
Yep. I think I will not speed up, but like I'm almost there.
Okay.
So some tips to mitigate the risks. You want to double check the information that the generative AI is giving you by asking it to check itself, by asking for links to sources of the information, by double checking the information. You want to avoid putting sensitive data into a prompt. You want to use only trusted platforms, and you want to use AI responsibly, which means don't use it for everything. Make sure you use it for things that really require additional support of AI. And if you can find the answer quickly by Googling it, don't use AI. Use it only where absolutely needed. And if you can opt for eco-friendly tools, that's a little bit more difficult to figure out. But some of the AI platforms actually disclose their sustainable practices and use of renewable energy. So that's something to think about. So some encouragements, even though I said a lot of things about how it's kind of, there are risks associated with it. And you'll notice here that the slide says AI and not specifically generative AI. It's intentional. I want to encourage everyone to explore artificial intelligence. It doesn't mean I want to encourage you to adopt all of its applications. I'm essentially encouraging continuous learning around these themes. And the easiest way to learn more around AI right now is to try some of the generative AI tools. Even the free versions, just try it out with simple things. You may decide that after trying one of these tools that it's not really worth it for you. You may try to, I just want to emphasize that you won't truly understand what it can and cannot do until you try it out yourself. And even if you never use it, you will have a sense of what it does when someone among your acquaintances says, oh, something came from ChatGPT or from Claude. You'll know exactly how and why you can question the validity of the information and just have a conversation around how it got to that information. All right, so Gary, I'm going to ask for your advice. I have one more little demo, or I can answer some questions.
How long is the demo?
Maybe 1 minute or two.
Go ahead and do that.
Okay, let me. Get to the demo.
While you're doing that, maybe you can answer a question that's come up twice now. If I use generative AI to create intellectual property, a book, a song, a picture, who owns the copyright to that?
So that's an interesting question that's still being worked out. The latest I heard, you can now claim copyright on that content, but I think it's still under review because I met a George Mason University professor who had written a book with the help of ChatGPT, and it was rejected for publication because of copyright or whatever issues. But then the law just changed, like the rules around copyright and AI, generative AI are changing. So it's kind of a murky area right now. The biggest areas, the biggest challenge with copyright and generative AI is that all of this training materials that it was trained on was actually, there was probably a lot of copyrighted materials in that. So now you're essentially leveraging all of that violation of copyright to create your own content. So it's still an evolving field, I think. I would say I'm not a copyright lawyer, so I don't really know what the exact answer is, but it's evolving.
Okay, thank you.
So here I have Claude, which is one of the other ones. So Claude is a tool created by a company called Anthropic. And here I'm going to show you a couple of things I tried in the last few days. I mean, each of these tools have their advantages and disadvantages. For Claude, I think I had to create an account, but it's a free account. I am not paying anything for this one. And here I asked, my prompt was, what books were published on the topic of healthy aging and health span in 2024 and 2025. And now it tells me something interesting. I'm not sure if you can read it, but I'll read it for you. I should note that since my knowledge cutoff is April 2024, I can't comprehensively verify So here, it's actually telling me some of its limitations. Its own training data has not been updated since April 2024, so it's not going to give me anything from 2025, which by the way is just a month and a half into it. And it's giving me a couple of books. And then I asked I said, are you able to tell if the Arlington Public Library has these books? And it told me no, it cannot do that. But it's telling me how to go there, which I know how to get to the library. And then I asked, what resources would you recommend on this topic? And it gave me all kinds of relevant. It didn't give me links though. I would probably have to ask for links if I wanted links. So each of those tools work slightly differently. And here in this case, because I have an account, even though it's a free account, it also saves my prompts. And I can delete them and I can do whatever. Here's an example where I asked for, I said I need to plan 5 light lunches that include protein and 5 dinners for one person. And I told it, what's in my fridge essentially. And it came up with, different, a mix of different recipes. I mean, not the detailed recipes, but menus essentially. So that was that. I could show you briefly before finishing with the slides. And please interrupt me with questions by now because I just want to go to the ChatGPT. I actually have an account that I pay. So I pay $20 a month for this account, and it's much more sophisticated in terms of what I can do. And it has projects, it has all kinds of things, and it allows me to do much more. But they all look pretty much the same in terms of, there's the prompt area. I can attach files. I can do all kinds of things here. But again, I'm spending $20 a month, which eventually I'm not sure I would continue to do that. Is there one that I can show you? Oh yeah, so I'm gonna try to help one of the ANV members with installing curtains without making holes in the walls. And I was like, oh, I might as well research what are the options when you can't drill anything into the walls. So I asked ChatGPT to help me figure out what the options were. And now that I know what these things are called, I can go to Home Depot website and figure out what I'm looking for. So it's kind of helped me to learn quickly what the options are. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing that. See. Trying to get back to the presentation. Oh, here, I got it. What else?
In the meantime, you talked about not putting personal information into your prompts. What are other personal security issues that we need to be aware of, and how do we protect ourselves? I know there's been a lot of pushback on this DeepSeek AI because it's coming to us out of China and nobody knows how much of what you put into it goes back to the Chinese. What other kinds of concerns like that do we need to be aware of?
Well, my answer is going to be more of a personal one. I'm not touching DeepSeek, and I'm trying to stay away from the different tools that are coming up, even if they're supposed to be better. I'm sticking with the basics of ChatGPT and Claude, really. I just tested Gemini for this presentation, but just stick to one tool. Don't try everything that comes up. Like a ChatGPT is, or Copilot from Microsoft. These are from stable organizations. Now, whether I trust them entirely with my data, I don't really trust anything anymore, but I'm trying to be careful when I prompt, but to be honest, you would have the same concern when you're putting a a search term, or you're doing search on Google, where's that data going, right? The same companies are creating these AI tools, all these giants, and we have to be careful. So I would say just, yeah, don't put personal information, and if you don't have to use AI, use something else.
Okay, we've got a couple of kind of related questions. One of them said that when they've tried using ChatGPT for uh, creative writing, the result is often vapid and banal. And someone else is asking, when you see images created by that may be generative AI, how can you spot that they're not real? And because they're getting better all the time. And that's kind of my follow-up question in both of those in terms of creative writing and image generation. How quickly are these things improving?
So I think things are improving very fast. The challenge is, do we really want them to improve that fast? I mean, I think that brings up other questions. In terms of creative writing, I've tried some things as well with my own writing. I find it totally unsatisfactory. And to be honest, I want my creative writing to be my own. But I have found ways to use ChatGPT in particular to do a lot of brainstorming when I'm stuck in a part of the plot or something. Like, there are ways to use these tools for brainstorming and for ideas generating and other things, and a little bit of editing, without asking ChatGPT to write the whole novel for me, or even, you know, write a chapter. I wouldn't do that, because it's definitely going to come up with something pretty bad. Not that my writing is better, but at least it's my writing, right? And I kind of missed the second part of the question.
Well, just how quickly are
Oh,
these things getting better?
so I see new functionalities coming up almost, you know, weekly, monthly, whatever. It's they're adding functionalities all the time. I'm not spending a huge amount of time testing the different models that are coming up, because I'm not using the tool for very sophisticated searches or sophisticated queries. If you are in a research environment and you're trying to use it for very sophisticated kind of research, then you need to use the more advanced models and all of that. I don't know that for most daily uses, the advanced models are actually that relevant. I know that the newest models are like doing some reasoning, and it's like they're becoming in a way more intelligent, but they're not going to replace the human brain anytime soon, and they're not going to replace human emotions and human ways of thinking about the world around us. So yes, they're getting better, but I would say don't plan on relying on them too much. Like, we need to be careful. Like, the over reliance is an issue that I think we need to be careful about, like not over relying, keeping our own skills up to speed. And that means understanding how the AI is able to help and not help, and where we want to keep our own voice in our writing and things like that.
And the other part of that question had to do with generated images.
Oh,
And if
yeah.
you've got any tips on looking at something and going, no, a person didn't create that.
Sometimes it's so obvious. It's like, I actually don't like the images. Most of the images that are created, I guess if you're very good at prompting, that's where prompting skills come in. You can create really good images. I would be definitely unable. I don't have the specific skills or whatever to determine if an image has been AI generated or not. And you can definitely, I mean, somebody who knows what they're doing can create images that you wouldn't be able to, you know. I don't have an AI detector. I also didn't have, when I was teaching, an AI or generative AI detector for the submissions that my students were sending me, which creates all kinds of issues as well. Like, did they actually create this, or they completely rely on generative AI to submit this paper.
Mhm. We've got a comment here. They've seen a report that using DeepSeek gives it access to everything in your Gmail account, which is
Well,
pretty scary. Have you heard that?
no, but it's possible because I mean, all of these companies are trying to integrate everything. So in order to provide more context-specific and personalized answers, if you give it access to your Gmail, then yes, it will have access to everything. The Copilot, the Microsoft tool in enterprises, has access to all of your emails and gives you summaries of all of your emails and does all kinds of things with your emails. But that's in a work setting where you know that your email isn't private anyway. So I wouldn't touch DeepSeek personally.
Okay. You mentioned early on that one of your other interests is writing speculative fiction. And a couple of people wanted to ask, what kind of fiction are you writing, and is any of it available for us to read?
Not yet. No, but the novel that I'm working on right now is focused on it's taking place in 2065. So it's in a kind of near to midterm future. And one of the main characters is a centenarian. So there's a lot of issues around aging and lots of issues related to what ANV does as an organization. So I will be happy to let people know when it's ready for public consumption, or if any early readers want to get a sense of what it's about, I'm happy to share at some point, just not yet.
Okay, it looks like Adriana has her hand up. If you want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, it's actually just a comment, and I don't want to, just building on what Barbara just said about giving it a try, because I know there's a lot of anxiety around generative AI, and something that folks might want to do just for themselves to kind of understand its limitations is to pick a topic that you're really, really knowledgeable about and plug that in and see how smart it is. And at this point in time, you might find out that it's actually not that smart, and it'll maybe allay some of the anxiety and fear that's out there, because generative AI is only as smart as what is currently available online and gathered up. So, there are still books that have not been digitized. There's still manuscripts and archives that are not available online. So it's only as smart as kind of the internet is right now. And if you pick a topic that you really know well and give it a go, I think it might help allay some anxiety and some fears about it. So that's all, just a comment.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point.
Okay, well, we're almost 10 minutes after 11, so it might be time to wrap this up and let you get on with your day.
Yeah, no
Um,
problem. So I have hopefully we can share the slides. I have a few additional resources links. That's all for people who might want to learn a little bit more or access some of the resources. And you can reach out to me through ANV, because I'm a volunteer there. If there's anybody who wants to have a longer conversation or a little personalized demo, I'm happy to help anyone.
Great. Well, I can send the slides to the A&V office, and they can make them available to anybody that emails in and asks for them.
Sounds great. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to do this. I hope it wasn't too confusing. I think hands-on is the best way to learn how to do this, but I try to include some little demos to at least give you a sense of what it looks like.
It was a great presentation, Barbara. I learned a lot myself in terms of AI, and I was only familiar with a little bit of it, and so you provided a lot of good information. So thank you so much. Look forward to getting your whole presentation and your slides. So yes, since it's 11:10, we need to close this out. Remind folks that to tune in next week to Coffee and Conversation. It'll be Felicia Bryce McFall, who's going to talk about her gallery, which is called From One Hand to Another. It's in Arlington's Green Valley. So you can look at the description on the website, and tune in tomorrow or next week at 10 o'clock on Wednesday to learn about this gallery. And I guess she also does calligraphy. And so she'll be talking about it. It's an artsy kind of presentation. So be sure and tune in. So